Guys, welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing a 2024 preview and prediction for the Oklahoma Sooners as they make their transition to the SEC. Brent Venables enters his third season as lead man, 16-10 mark under his belt. Todd Bates, Zach Alley, Jay Valley will stay as the DCs. And Seth Luttrell, second year on staff, first year as offensive coordinator. They go 10-3 last season, beating Texas. They lose Jeff Levy to Mississippi State. And then, of course, the 12th ranked recruiting class for the Sooners. Looking at this offense, Nick, there's a lot to discuss because they lose a lot. They only return 2 starters. The entire offensive line is gone. Lose their top pass catcher, but the next 5 are back. At one point, the run game in the FBS was dead last, and explosive runs of 20-plus yards. Really turned it up in the back half of the season. Overall, they averaged over 40 points per game. Though a lot to discuss, Nick. We'll go ahead and start with Jackson Arnold, the guy that was, a prodigy out of high school, 10th overall ranked recruit, a great touch passer at all levels, can work at different angles and velocity with his zip and, be unaffected. This, of course, is his high school scouting report. Good on the move, but his high awareness in the pocket. Now, this is what we saw versus Arizona in his first start. Third play of the game, gets some pressure in his face, throws it across the middle to what he thought was a wide open Drake Stoops, free safety right at the whole time. His second INT later in the game came on a late read, again to a wide open Stoops, late and inside. Such a good quick release for this RPO system. Showed nice rhythm and ability to rip it to the boundary. Really like his mobility, had a few good runs, and a great touchdown scrambling to his left in that game. His other touchdown being a play-action post route, where he once again showed some nice patience and threw a great ball. The wide receiver slightly had to slow up, but it was a good play nonetheless. And his last pick was, again, on some bad vision on a deeper slant RPO. The linebacker baited him the whole time, and, he had to pay the price for that one. The mental processing showed some issues, but played a very tough defense that a lot of quarterbacks, even Caleb Williams, had issues with earlier on in that season, Nick. So no blemish there against the Wildcats. That's just what I saw. 5-star coming out of high school, though, is going to get the keys fully to this offense. What do you expect from him in year one?
I think Arnold's going to be a really solid quarterback. Certainly the mistakes do worry me, but, that comes to the territory when you are a younger quarterback. Getting your first career start in a bowl game, tough spot to be in, obviously, with Dylan Gabriel leaving. I think so that's not really going to be something that breaks my heart, in terms of what I look at here. I think it is disappointing at times, right? You really do look at the stats in that game, and there were hit or miss moments, right? You alluded to, you broke down those games, right? 26 of 45. 57% comp rate, 361 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 picks. Was the stat line against Arizona, didn't play a whole lot of meaningful minutes, played garbage time minutes and a bunch of other random games throughout the season. I think Arnold steps in here, though. I like his arm talent. I like what he can do in the pocket. I think he's a really solid quarterback top to bottom. He's going to have to, be trial by fire, though. Jump into it as a sophomore. Doesn't have a whole lot of experience as a starter, obviously, other than outside that one game. And now he's jumping in with the keys to the offense with a new offensive coordinator. I do like that they're going to run the same, similar style, but Levy leaving will certainly have an impact on this offense, and it will lead to some, disappointing results, in my opinion.
And you're certainly going to talk about Seth Luttrell and this, because he's an air raid guy himself. So we're going to see some different variations. Gavin Sawchuk at running back went on a complete bender the back half of the season. Great elusiveness, does well at making initial man miss with, a quick, stiff step. Has good speed following his acceleration. Doesn't have the best long speed or twitch, but was great off their right side for him. Inside zone, follows his pulling lineman well. The rest of this running back unit, Javonte Barnes, should occupy the number 2 role, but was nowhere to be found after the first 3 weeks following an injury. It really dampened his touches the rest of the year. Great at getting to the edge, though, in zone. He's a physical, violent runner I've seen at times. They picked up a UT Martin transfer, Sam Franklin, 1,300 yards last season, sparked plenty of big plays, but he did have 5 fumbles, landed 3 running backs in this year's class. Tatum, their top-ranked recruit, not joining till the summer. Overall, a good unit with depth, not overly blown away with this group, though, Nick. I think Sawchuk, though, what he was able to accomplish in the back half of the year was very impressive, and it was good for this offense because, again, we multiple times in the middle of the last year talked about how they were not very explosive. Going into November, I believe, that's when they were ranked dead last, and they really are able to turn it around over the final month, but they got to be able to keep that consistency.
I like Sawchuk a lot. I think he's a really solid back, 744 yards on the ground, 6.2 yards per carry, 9 scores for him. Solid numbers. Use him a little bit as a receiver as well. He had 14 grabs for about 100 yards as well. So nice variety there. I think you can get a lot out of Sawchuk. I think he's a really solid player, top to bottom. Caleb Hicks, what is he going to look like as a redshirt freshman coming back? Javonte Barnes, is he going to be fully healthy and able to help out on this offense? I am concerned. I think there is a lack of depth on this running back room. I do like Sawchuk to lead away, though.
You look at a wide receiver room that I think is incredibly underrated. It's going to have a good year. Nick Anderson, he was a walking big play, averaging 21 yards per catch and 10 touchdowns last year. Had 3 scores on 3 receptions versus Tulsa, for example. Generated great depth on his routes. was just good at blowing by defenders out wide. Great suddenness off the line of scrimmage mixed with those long strides. Big fan of this player. Jaleel Farouk, 2 touchdowns in the first 3 games, none the rest of the season. Played more slot this year, mainly out wide though. Good at forcing missed tackles, great at tracking the ball downfield, especially on underthrown balls. Impressive quickness leads to them getting him the ball very quickly at 6'1", 204. Andrell Anthony proved to be an incredibly valuable player early on in the season before getting hurt after transferring from Michigan. A pure XZ wide receiver that showed great hands. Another great outside pass catcher in Jaden Gibson, who was good for them, scored a touchdown in 3 straight games to close out the year, 6'5", 200. Who will be in the slot is a mystery. Brennan Thompson at 160 is very fast. Had 241 yards on 7 grabs. Had 2 big scores over the last 2 games as well. Juwaiz Petaway, a top 60 recruit in last year's class, also has great speed and acceleration after the catch. Should see both of them take on larger roles. They also pick up Deion Burks. Didn't play much slot last year, but has great vertical abilities from Purdue. Quick out on his breaks, can make contested catches. Likely won't be put in that role in effort of showcasing his versatility, though I think he might be able to do it. A lot of depth and a lot of variety here, Nick. Great makeover at wide receiver. This is a room at times we've been critical of. Even going into last year, we were kind of worried about who would step up. We got our answers in more ways than one. This is an incredibly deep room all of a sudden. They got speed and they have size. And with a young quarterback, this is the recipe for success.
I mean, look at this wide receiver room. Sure, they lose 84 grabs and 10 touchdowns and about 1,000 yards from Drake Stoops, the son of the legendary coach that coached at Oklahoma. But then you return your next top 5 pass catchers. Really solid when you have a young quarterback that has continuity and guys that he's worked with in practice and guys that he's experienced playing with. Nick Anderson, 800 yards receiving, 21 yards per grab and 10 scores. Anderson's going to be that number 1 guy here. He's going to take over that mantle and really try to dominate on the field. I like Anderson to break out and be an absolute star this year. Farouk, waiting for him to break out. I said that last year. I really think there's an opportunity for him to step up and break out again. I know I feel like a broken record with Farouk because I really have been expecting him to step up and break out. Maybe this is the time he'll finally get to that 694 yards receiving, 15.4 yards per grab, and 2 scores for him. Andrell Anthony, I'm excited to see what he can do. 429 yards receiving last year, 15.9 and 1 scores for him. Jaden Gibson as well. He had 5 touchdowns and 375 yards, and then Brennan Thompson, a really nice big play threat, 34.4 yards per grab on his 7 grabs, 241 and 2 scores. So really solid rotation here, really solid depth top to bottom. They return a lot of guys outside their top guy. I think this is really solid to have, and with Arnold as a quarterback with sky-high potential, this wide receiving room and an offensive attack through the air can be really, really solid.
Yeah, and this isn't a bad tight end room either. Austin Stogner departs. Solid room here. Jake Roberts, he was good at UNT and Baylor. Coaches have been raving about Bauer Sharp. True freshman Devon Mitchell, a strong physical guy, 6'4", 240. He's a bad matchup for safeties and linebackers. He might see some time in the slot. Stogner, he did a good bit last season, so that's something I want to look to seeing this year. Look at this offensive line. Again, they lose all 5 starters. They have a tough job in front of great O-line coach Bill Biedenbaugh. Jacob Sexton had a few starts at right tackle last season, did play a bit early on the left side. Wasn't all that impressive, 6'6", 325. He was annihilated versus Kansas and Arizona in pass pro. Troy Everett was quite good versus lesser competition, but got roughed up versus Texas. He was replaced by Caden Green in that game, and he didn't start again until the bowl game at center. Green, of course, transfers out. Will be out until right around the start of the season, though, with Everett, with a knee surgery, so that's not great. Can play anywhere on the interior line, so, a bit of a loss here, despite the struggles. Certainly the interior offensive line is slated to have transfers as starters right guard Gary and Hatchett, a reserve from Washington. Wasn't all that good in his appearances. 6'4", 303 from him. Fabichi Nwayu played right guard for North Texas. He reunites with Seth Luttrell. Great strength and an aggressive run blocker last year. Ex-walk-on now, likely the starter in the SEC. Immense hard worker, though. Best addition here is probably Branson Hickman. He's going to be the starting center, regardless of who's around him. 2 phenomenal years for SMU in all facets. Second team All-AAC. 2,400 career snaps to his name. A lot of impressive experience there. Spencer Brown, an average player, but, is an experienced right tackle from Michigan State. Michael Tarquin comes over from USC. He's in a battle for a starting nod. He has guard flexibility, though, 6'5", 300. He was good versus bad competition. Got absolutely ran through by UCLA and Notre Dame's great defensive lines, though. Overall, a unit that was good last year, especially late in the year in terms of creating run lanes. But this is a complete makeover, Nick. I think a sizable step back is in store. Hickman, though, has proven to be great in the past. But even he'll probably have some growing pains in this new conference. And, even when Everett eventually joins the lineup, he wasn't all that impressive for him. The biggest thing I keep alluding to is Seth Luttrell, right? This is an air raid guy, and I think that's important to note because, this might be the perfect storm to lose your entire offensive line. You have this great receiving core of a young 5-star quarterback and a guy who's probably going to be leaning on the passing game as a play caller, and he's going to be comfortable in doing so. So I think even though the offensive line is a big mystery, it's probably not going to be all that much of a worry.
I do think this offensive line has some high upside potential, but this is a gamble, right? High risk, high reward here as you plug in 5 new guys. Always tough when you lose all your stars. I think Hickman's a great ad from SMU, right? I really think he's a big physical center, really solid top to bottom. I think Hatchett at left guard has potential to grow up as well. Michael Tarquin, what is he going to look like? Is he going to get reps at left guard or left tackle? Jacob Sexton, he played in a few games last year. What's he going to look like in a full-time starting role? That's a very key position. Jake Taylor as well. Is he going to battle with Spencer Brown, who's a transfer as well? What are they going to look like on the right side there? This is a tough offensive line to figure out, but I do agree with you, right? The transition to the air raid means that maybe the damage of losing 5 key offensive line players is not the biggest loss in the world due to the scheme that they're going to switching to. Is that going to help mitigate the damage? I think it's certainly possible, but this offensive line is one definitely keep an eye on throughout the season.
Look at the final offensive verdict. This unit has a lot of potential. In the past 2 seasons, we felt that they would still produce at a high rate, despite having worries about the wide receiver group, and those worries have now wavered. I love this wide receiver group. A young quarterback has a lot of potential to thrive here. The air raid implementation might be perfect timing considering the loss of the entire O-line. I think we see adequate balance, though, on this unit, but more physical opponents will probably really be able to slow them down, I'm assuming, in the run game. Big risks and big plays galore. I think this is going to be the style this year. Good production, I think, for this offense overall. Look at the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, Brent Venables, bread and butter. You got a lot of cooks in the kitchen here working on this side. Lose 9 guys in the portal, only added 4. Top 6 tacklers are back. Top 6 tackle for loss guys are back. They returned 7 starters. Second in FBS with 20 interceptions. Only had 14 sacks in 9 conference games, though, Nick. And that's certainly the biggest weakness right now is this defensive line. The ad of Dominic Williams, a lot of people wanted from TCU, might just be a saving grace. I mean, I can't emphasize how important it was that they landed this guy. A physically developed player who's great at taking on double teams. Strength is just overwhelming. Has been great against the run. Fights off hands well at 6'2", 320. Defensive end Ethan Downs, a great returnee. Great upper body, allows him to land right in opponents' chests. Has great spin move, but a variety of others as well. Pretty good at splitting the B gap. Stacks well versus the run. He's typically a mismatch versus tight ends. High-motored player. Needs to keep building in strength and quickness, though, as a pass rusher. And then, obviously, the rest of this defensive line, Venables' scheme starts with big, strong defensive linemen that are productive. We had great ones at Clemson, and that's why they were so dominant. Their run D was much better this past year, had a great rotation. That's going to be a little iffy this year, though. They do return DeJoun Terry on the inside. Was great for them as a gap clogger at 6'3", 321. Good strength and plays hard. Grayson Halton was efficient. His near 100 snaps was mainly just a rotational DN, but he's probably going to be on the interior now. David Stone was a high-end 5-star, 6'3", 283. Already has some good strength, nice lateral mover, impressive heavy hands, a disruptive player that will be leaned on early, as the rest of the depth is very iffy. You got guys like Devon Sears, only played a couple of snaps at 289 pounds. Ashton Sanders, a sophomore, at 284. Edge department is very promising, though. R. Mason Thomas was in line to start last year before a preseason injury. Was a good player late for them in the year. Missed 0 tackles on 175 snaps. P.J. Itabori, a 5-star in last year's class, was able to gain some experience. Didn't provide much, though. Impressive physical traits. Has only continued to bulk up and has a nice motor. Trace Ford, he's a veteran that's going to offer some reliable services. And then Caden Woolard, coming off a great year from Miami, Ohio, where he had 9.5 sacks. OU's really recruited the D-line to a good tune, but in 2024, it seems like a good bunch that's going to showcase improvements, Nick. I know that's a lot I just threw at you. But again, 14 sacks in 9 conference games is horrible. It's got to improve. It's got to double up.
They certainly got to find a way to improve the sack numbers. I think having Ethan Downs back helps with that, right? 29 total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. He's your top sack getter last year. Had a pick as well, Downs. I like him a lot on that right side. Really solid player. The ad of Williams from TCU is an incredible ad. He's a really solid player. They add really nice production from him coming over from a former conference foe, DeJoun Terry. 18 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 1 sack for him. Solid numbers, in my opinion. They can certainly improve on Trace Ford. On that left side, 18 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 3 pass breakups. Has a really good block on the line with his hand. Has an interception as well. Our Mason Thomas, he's going to be fully healthy this year. What's he going to look like? Grayson Halton, 11 total tackles, or Grayson Halton, that is 11 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss. Can he get those numbers up? I like the rotational piece they have here. I think the depth is solid. This, it starts in the trenches for these Brent Venables coach defenses. What is this defense going to look like this year? Are they going to find a way to get those sack numbers higher?
Obviously they operate multiple schemes here. This linebacking group, though, certainly, last year we weren't all that high on outside of Danny Stutzman. This is a guy who's a high-effort stat sheet stuffer, shows good patience and reads very well, does a good job using length and takes on blocks with no regards. The athletic ability isn't all that great. His range really comes from motor more than anything. Improved his missed tackle percentage this past year. His mental viability in man coverage, though, 6'4", 231. Kip Lewis, second leading tackler, was pretty great in Stutzman lone absence versus Oklahoma State. Had 15 tackles, showed a quick trigger, flies downhill. Really liked his run stopping abilities and seems to flow into coverage pretty well. Is undersized at 6'1", 214, though. Third most tackles on the team as well, behind Jared Kanek. Another guy here in the linebacking core had 18, who wasn't really good in any regard for the team, but it was his first time seeing extensive action, so the experience is there. Kobe McKenzie, a true sophomore, saw a lot of time. Best when coming downhill as well. Good base for covering. They're hoping his pop and striking ability can help make him a good backup. Lewis Carter, top 130 recruit in last year's class. This is a good linebacking room, I'd say, with lots of youth. I think there's great upside in this group. I know you're about to read off Stutzman's absurd numbers, Nick. The guys behind him, though, they had their struggles, but there's a lot of promise.
Stutzman certainly has incredible numbers that really jump off the screen at you. 104 total tackles, 16 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, a pick, and 3 pass breakups. A do-it-all guy, right? Really solid player in the middle, a captain in that defense, a really solid player. I like the numbers, right? He definitely gets a lot of tackles. His coverage asset, his coverage liability certainly is there a little bit at linebacker, but it's not too big of a deal. I think he's a really top player and a great player to return. Always fantastic return to your top tackler at 104 tackles. Kip Lewis, 66 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, plus a sack. Good numbers there as well. Jaron Clank, that is solid player, 62 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. Good player in rotational ability. I think, Lewis Carter could really step up as a true sophomore. Got some nice appearances last year. Kobe McKenzie as well. What's he going to look like as a redshirt sophomore? So I think this is a very deep room, top to bottom. I really do like this linebacker room. I think it's a very underrated room that has some solid potential there. They return a lot of guys. They return everybody back. And I think when you have a guy like Stutzman who's going to get 100 tackles for you, that's a really solid thing to have on your stat sheet.
This linebacking group could potentially include Deshaun McCullough as well. Missed time with knee injury, limited his snaps, but he was great when he was on the field. Most figured he'd be the perfect cheetah role, that hybrid role here in this Venables defense. Played in the slot a good bit, was a good run stopper in the box. Certainly wonder how he'll do with a full workload. Great athleticism for 6'5", 220. You look at the secondary. Kendall Dolby will contend for that cheetah role as well. Played in slot more than anyone last season. His only 2 sacks came in the bowl game. Did a good job of dipping past offensive linemen. Should be used as a pass rusher more, in my opinion, because he has some great speed. Billy Bowman, he was a great player. Took a big step for them. Did miss a team-high 22 tackles. He's a highly aggressive player, though, so he died by the sword and lived by it as well. He got lazy at times and looked for reps. He does have great ball skills. In terms of reps, instead of just tackling the guy, he would try to force a fumble. 3 pick sixes to his name, though. They lose 2 safeties, but they get back Robert Spears-Jennings, who was a quality run defender. Pretty great tackler. Ex-5-star Peyton Bowen, though, is likely to step into that lead role. Impressive explosion. Forced a big fumble versus Texas. Showed nice pop as a hard hitter. Didn't show much of his ball skills last year, but he has them to be able to, match the covering ability in the center of the field. At corner, Woody Washington, he's a veteran. He's been around a while. A lot of different defensive coordinators he's been around. Really improved as a tackler. Slimmer frame guy that has good awareness and instincts. Allowed the 15th most yards in CFB by corners, though 600 plus allowed. Gentry Williams was pretty good when healthy. I think Kenai Walker has some versatility to him. He was sound in coverage. He'll need to impress, lock down a full-time starting role this upcoming season. Jacoby Johnson has good size, 6'2", 206. They returned some 4-stars from last year's class. Makari Vickers, Josiah Wagner. The unit looked more disciplined, played with more intensity and aggressiveness at times. Did a really good job locating the ball as well, Nick, of all those interceptions. They did allow a lot of big plays, 116th nationally and 20-plus yard pass plays allowed. Really need to tighten up in zone. But much like the other parts of this defense, there's a lot of excitement here, and I think they might have the nation's best safety duo if they can progress at an adequate rate, that being Bowen and Bowman.
There's some solid players in the secondary here. I think McCullough is a really good player in that cheetah position. If he's fully healthy, 30 total tackles for him, 3.5 tackles for loss, 3 pass breakups while he was, battling injuries. Dubley as well, 49 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 picks, 4 pass breakups. Really solid numbers there. Billy Bowman, I'm super excited to watch him this year. 63 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 6 picks, 3 pick sixes, 4 pass breakups, 238 yards return yards in interceptions. Incredible number. When you look at that, averaging 40 yards per return is a really solid number. Woody Washington, 48 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 7 pass breakups, your top defender. In that regard, they're returning Robert Spears-Jennings. I like him at 38 total tackles plus a pass breakup. Gentry Williams, 30 tackles plus 4 tackles for loss and 3 picks for him. Solid returning numbers there. They return a lot of talent here. I think this is a deep room that has some solid players. Bowman's a very great player. Excited to watch him. I like Washington a lot. Spears Jennings, what is he going to look like? I think he's a solid player. They had some solid freshman recruits coming in as well. This is a very deep unit that I'm excited to see how they play out.
The verdict for this side of the ball, Venables' unit is starting to trend in the right direction and continues to improve on a yearly basis, but I just don't think this interior D-line is ready to be a strength in the SEC right away. The add of Williams is absolutely massive, though. Even though the edge department has some good players, pass rush wasn't optimal, although they did find 5 sacks each against Texas and Arizona. I think the linebacking group led by Stutzman will take some sizable steps forward. And this is largely the same DB group from a year ago that did allow a lot of big plays. And again, I think that safety duo Bowman and Bowen could be something special. Good defense here, not great. I think, the run defense and big plays allowed are the things you want to monitor and look at the progression in that regard. Look at the prediction for the Sooners. This team is pretty a quiet one, I would say. As they enter the SEC with lots of youth, a ton of upside. Arnold in the passing game have the potential to really boom this year. A heavier approach to the air due to a potential lackluster O-line is kind of concerning. On defense, it's much of the same, where they have good players at all levels with great upside, but the trenches just aren't quite up to par. But with McCullough being healthy, Williams coming over to clog up the interior, guys like Stutzman and the safeties that I keep alluding to, they could be playmaking galore. I think this is a tough schedule, likely not quite ready to compete, but this is a good team. Venables, kind of like Kirby Smart, Nick, waited a long time, took the right job. Early on, it wasn't all that pretty, but OU seems to be on a similar trajectory. I have no worries about this program at all, even if they go 7-5 or lose to Texas and go 6-6. I think that they beat Texas. That's a rivalry that can go either way. I think the Sooners will get it done after a red-hot start to the year. I do have them picking up a crucial win at home early on in the season against Tennessee. I think the passing attack could really have some things for that secondary. Back half of the year is impossible, though, Nick. You're looking at teams that all could potentially be in the playoffs. And I have them losing all of those games, but it's possible they likely steal one from somebody on the road at Auburn as well. I see just the road games being a big hiccup for them, but this is a good team that's going to compete in most of these games.
This is a good team that just, falls victim to a tough schedule in the first year in the SEC. They got to play Texas. That's a toss-up every single year, but they got to, host Alabama, travel to LSU, Missouri, Ole Miss, and Auburn. Very, very tough. Could they pick off Auburn or LSU? Yeah, I think that's certainly possible. Very tough schedule top to bottom in terms of conference play. Tennessee at home as well. One of the toughest schedules in the SEC right now. The non-conference, they play some teams that are interesting, right? Houston, Tulane. Those are very interesting matchups. I do think they win both those games, but they are interesting to look at. Then Temple and Maine, you don't really, worry about those at all. South Carolina, they should win that game with ease. Tough schedule, but I do agree with you. They're right. I think Oklahoma's going to keep the faith and trust Venables at this point in time. He's a proven defensive coach that's building his defense. The recruiting is getting better for this team. They're bringing in solid guys. I think you keep the faith here. Just don't panic at all. Let the thing continue to develop. Let it build out slowly in the new conference. And this team could be very much contenders to win the SEC in 2-3 years. At this point in time, I think Venables is in a good spot. The team is heading in the right direction out there in Norman. Sure, the Oklahoma fans are not going to be happy to lose 5-6 games this year. I don't blame them, but I do think keep the faith, trust the progress of this team, and this team will pay off in the future. A bit of a tough year won the SEC, but I think things are going to get better as time goes on for this team.
Now, I wouldn't be fully shocked if they just explode and win 10 games and pull a few upsets. I definitely think that this team has that type of upside. We'll just see what kind of droves they can progress in. Very exciting stuff of Oklahoma, Nick. I'm very excited to see how this offense does this year, and then some of those crucial players on defense as well. So a good team here. 7 wins, though. I don't have the guts to pick anything else, though. Like you said, a victim of a tough schedule. That's going to be it for today's episode, Nick. Appreciate joining me. Oklahoma's kind of getting the little brother vibes as Texas comes in red hot. But I think the Sooners going to be knocking on the door very soon.
Looking forward to welcoming Oklahoma to the SEC. Them in Texas is the first preview we've done of the two newcomers to the conference. Excited to see what they look like in the SEC. This is a move that could be really beneficial for the conference as a whole. Oklahoma steps in. They find themselves in a tough spot here with that tough schedule, but I think them and Texas both in the long run will be very productive teams for the conference.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.